My name is Winnie Brim. I was born here on Mona Mona, but my maiden name was Winnie Riley. I was born in 14th of the 11th, 1934. There was about 10 of us in the family, but all of my other elder sister and brother were sent into a dormitory when they were 6 years of age. So I didn't actually grow up with my parents. And so when I was 10 years old, I was put in dormitory too with my other three sisters. It was very hard on mission. That's because they believe that we got to be taught discipline. We had no mattresses, no mattress for our bed, only just one blanket and maybe a few clothes. So what we had to do is to put our clothes down, use it for our mattress, and then use it as a clothing as well. I can't remember that I even had a towel to my name. I asked my mother once, I said, "Mum, how come you're not teaching me how come you're not teaching us how to talk language?" And she said, no, we're not allowed to. Because you see, if the superintendent found out that my mother taught us how to talk language, they would take her away from us, and we would lose our mother. And that's how we lost some of our language. But yeah, it was really hard on a mission. But that's the only thing we know on a mission then at that time.
We've been in this country as Aboriginal Australians for tens of thousands of years, and despite the impact of a pretty virulent colonisation process, where on our missions and communities, government reserves, we were, very severely punished if we spoke language or practiced culture, and the intent was to eradicate it, to assimilate us. One mission run by a church society spoke proudly of eradicating that pagan behaviour. And then when we had government legislation to give control of those communities over to indigenous peoples, and the church agreed and was part of the process and removed themselves, within 6 months ceremony was back being practiced. And to me that speaks volumes for the resilience of cultures. There's been a renaissance in the recent 20-30 years here in Australia following certain political events. I mean, in the 1967 we had the referendum, and we saw programs being developed by the federal government in education, in employment. That, along with political activity, gave rise to a strident voice with Indigenous Australia to articulate their rights, their human rights. People are standing up proudly and articulating. And I think human beings will always do that and should do that. And I am conscious of my responsibilities as a father and grandfather and a senior person within my community to secure a commitment to understanding and knowing our old ways.
We need to teach our kids, black and white kids, so that people can have a better understanding. Last year we had an apology, but that actually signified for most Indigenous people an end to the denial of the fact that we exist. They used to deny that we ever came from here, and now that apology actually states for the country that the denial phase is over and let's get on with it. And then that's for Aboriginal people and non-Indigenous people to work out how we can best do that. One of it is through sharing of knowledge, what's appropriate knowledge. It's important to look at the cultural side to get that re-strength and self-identity, and to nurture the aspect of self-identity, self-preservation, they're just being proud of themselves, because we've been taught that Captain Cook, for instance, discovered this country and there were no Aboriginals. So kids grow up and thinking, well, we're Aboriginals, we're from this country, but they're teaching us that Captain Cook discovered it. So that's very important. We need to create an environment where the kids are very proud and strong within their own culture, and that's culture that comes with knowledge of who they are, knowledge of where they come from, and knowledge of what they do within their community.
Aboriginal people were seen very much as the exotic subjects, if you like, a group of people who were, supposed to be the last Stone Age people left on Earth, a kind of a curio, not quite human. And I think that it's desperately important for Aboriginal people who are now trying to establish their identities. They're trying to change the terrible circumstances that have existed in this country for many years. They have much lower standards of health, they're overly represented in prison, and some people have just terrible living conditions, but even the people who live in cities and have perhaps the same living standards that non-Indigenous people have, they still have terrible circumstances because of the dispossession of their country and not having any identity and constantly being an underclass.
Because in Australia there seems to be a mentality of waiting for the government to solve problems, and that is really what's being developed from welfare, and welfare has really destroyed the motivation and the aspirations of Indigenous people in this country, basically because they were told that they couldn't do anything for themselves, and they were actually told what to do ever since colonisation hit this country. So getting that motivation and getting people to realise that you have to get up and meet halfway and not wait around for people and just start doing what's important now, because it'll pay off in the future.
Knowledge education is about working with people to put it out there and to develop relationships, I guess, with other peoples and within your own cultural group, of course. But the preservation is about survival of people and cultures. We are constantly on the alert to ensure that we maintain our cultural base. So knowledge maintenance is about that survival, I guess.
People have a connection to country, and people were connected to country, and they were connected to every resource on this land, and all this river, and all the rainforest and trees, no matter what country it is, people were all connected to that, and they knew everything. They knew the fish in the water, they knew to take only what they wanted, they knew the links between the water and the land and the plants and animals, and to be a part of this. And they applied management and they applied their existence on this land to maintain all this beauty of country and culture. And for our young people today and for our people of today, that's something that they're really missing, And that's something that we want to be able to share with everybody. That really is what we need to be, aiming for the future. Because there's nothing going to stop the fact that we've got different people in the world. There's nothing that's going to stop the fact that, that we have to make dollars and work for a living. But we do need to maintain our old values and true values.
What I'm doing here is a traditional basket that made by Jabagai. One of the dilly bags, this one is made out of the black palm, which you take the fibre out, and it take at least a couple of weeks to actually take the fibre out of the black palm. Now this one here is made out of the lamandra. So that's another sort of dilly bag, but made out of the Dalma grass, that the Jabagai, that's our language name, but it's the family of the lamandra. So they are the two different baskets that you can see that made, our traditional baskets. The dilly bag is used to take poison out of poisonous food, like the cycad nut, the black bean, and they'll put it in the stream. You usually make huge ones that they put all the black palm in there, they split and this will lay in the stream, running water. That'll take the poison out of the black bean. So, and the huge ones are made for putting babies in. They make huge ones also. But it's just a beginning. I'm just teaching. Me and my mum, Winnie Brim, are the teacher. The ladies here that are learning now, so all of them are Jabagai. They are descendant of Jabagai. So we'll teach anyone, even, other people that are interested in our culture, help keeping it alive, and things like that is very important for us. This is the oldest basket in the world, and it's been carried on from generation, handed down from generation to generation. Now it's our turn to hand it down, the weavers, to the next generation. and so on. So it'll be kept alive no matter what. We'll make sure.
That's the value of our traditional knowledge, and that's what we need to start to express and demonstrate to our own people, but also to the broader community, to show that it is very important that we start to draw on these values and start to create change by maintaining our baseline formula, of our indigenous cultures and knowledge systems that have been already living on this country for thousands of years,
The anthropologist Deborah Bird Rose writes and says that if you want to know about the ecology of arid zone and tropical Australia, you will find it in the minds of Aboriginal people and in the languages of Aboriginal people. The linguist Dorothy Tunbridge went to write a linguistic analysis of the Matana language of South Australia and the Flinders Ranges. She found reference to extinct species and ended up writing a zoology of the Flinders Ranges. It's that kind of depth of knowledge that we hold. I mean, this is the extent of knowledge which has been sustained over an oral telling tradition for tens of thousands of years, and longer perhaps. That, to me, says there's intellectual property. And the system really hasn't come to terms with the Western or however you describe it, intellectual property laws that are enacted don't recognise to the extent that they should recognise. You take it into the medical field. I mean, a lot of the medicines that we enjoy on the open market now have come from Indigenous knowledge of the natural plant world. And Indigenous people don't get any monetary benefit. Their quality of life has not necessarily improved, whereas the people who have taken the knowledge, disrespected the intellectual property rights and marginalised them have made quite a good outcome for themselves financially. From my point of view, I would rather remain true to my cultural rules and law than have money.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge systems are not the same as Western knowledge systems, whereby in the West all information is freely available to anyone who wants to view it or listen to it or read it. Aboriginal cultures were very much staged acquisition of knowledge, so that people went through many stages of initiation. There wasn't just one initiation, they went through many, many stages of the law. So all knowledge is not available to everyone. Furthermore, all of the knowledge that resides in libraries and archives and museums was taken in the colonial context, was often taken without informed consent, or if it was taken with informed consent, no one told anyone it was going to end up in a library or an archive or a museum.
In Indigenous culture, you only obtain a certain amount of knowledge at a certain point in time in your life. It isn't just handed over. When you get into a situation where there's a knowledge there that's on the verge of being extinct or lost, when people really have to change their view on how that knowledge is transferred over. You even have situations where clans will initiate younger men, even though they're not from that region, just to keep up that tradition, even though those traditions and customs aren't from their native clan. And that's purely because the clan that they're from, that knowledge is lost. If you've got a lot of knowledge to fall back on and the people to obtain that knowledge, you'll probably find in the most cases they say, no, we don't want it recorded. The structure's in place for that to be maintained. So when it starts to get a bit freighted and you only have a couple of people with that knowledge, in order to maintain it and to keep it going, recording it is the only option in some cases.
Where you once used oral tradition and art form and dance, etc. to pass knowledge, there are other formats now, other genres. There's film, there's photograph, there's etc. etc. Now, Aboriginal people are using that. I mean, you go to our communities and for a long time now, I mean, people are surprised at the level of use of computer technology, for instance. You have schools, I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, in remote areas and earlier than when I visited, would go on school excursions, and a simple day's excursion with some photographs, some sketches is put into a storybook and then digitised. So that records, that keeps an ongoing record of what life is like in that community.
A lot of Aboriginal communities are now asking us to digitise material and send it back to them, and then they're using that material to recreate other educational materials or just to have in their own culture centre. So we now have this fabulous collection of almost 1 million audiovisual items. We have recordings of languages which aren't spoken anymore, and these are absolutely invaluable to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Indigenous communities come to us because we have developed protocols which have been adopted in lots of countries around the world on how to handle Indigenous material, what's appropriate, what isn't, because some of it, while we may have it, isn't for public consumption because of cultural considerations. Anything that we think is immediately at risk obviously is our first priority, to preserve it to a new format, so that, because often there's only one copy of these things and once it's gone, it's gone. I think like most Indigenous cultures we've got lots of issues of substance abuse and loss of family and loss of place and dysfunctional communities and families, and I think a lot of that is absolutely about loss of identity. That's why I think the returning of these materials is so important, because it's about who these people are, and it's a basic human right to know who you are. We go to places in communities and show people the first photo they've ever seen of their mother or grandmother, and that's something everyone else in this country takes for granted and indeed is a basic human right, and I don't think there's much recognition of the value of that for Aboriginal people.
You know, when we take back materials to communities, it was just an amazing journey for them and for us, because, you know, you got old aunties and uncles who are like 70 years old who had never heard of their traditional language, or they hadn't heard their traditional language in like 50 years, and then you take an audio tape back and a digitised recording back to their community, they hear that and they like break down in tears because it's so emotional for them.
While I come here, there was a lady that done a script on my grandfather called Ero Black, and I come down to see what was in it, to see what can benefit for our town. I discovered Ero Black after 55 years. He was buried in Wilcannia. I've discovered him, I've seen him, found him in the cemetery. He's buried with nothing, and I believe this old man was a king of the Darling River. He played musical instruments for the people. He visited the Queen and is one of the Australian Aboriginal cricketers. I believe if this the same old man from Wilcannia was the king of the Darling River, I believe that he needs to be recognised in a beautiful plaque to say, who is he? So I and my children and the ancestors or the other people will never ever forget about him, as long as they can see something to say, this is him.
As for the digital technology, the real crucial issue is for the intellectual property laws to recognise the sacred, secret nature of knowledge within some cultures. You know, that's just a fact within our culture. There's men's business, there's women's business, there's secret knowledge, there's sacred knowledge, there's public knowledge, and they should remain as they are.
It's not up to non-Indigenous curators or librarians to decide what might be a nice depiction of an Aboriginal person. Allow the community to decide how they want to educate the world about themselves, and they might not be particularly interested in a photograph of themselves standing in a possum skin with a spear. We regard all material in our collection as sensitive. Even the most seemingly harmless material, like a tape with 10 words on it, the last 10 words of a particular language left in existence, can actually be very sensitive information. And I don't think that it is right that anyone can just go in and see certain material which perhaps a younger person or a woman or a man in that community wouldn't be eligible to see, and request copies of it and perhaps put it in a book or on the web or whatever people want to use it for. I actually believe that this material was collected in a powerless context, and I think it's time now to make sure that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are able to control that material.
There's all this talk about, putting collections on the website and making web availability, but in terms of Aboriginal people, I think you've got to tread really carefully around that kind of stuff, because, once you put something out there in the public domain, then it becomes a free-for-all for everyone to access, and once that's out there, then Aboriginal people don't have control of that anymore, and that's really a really important issue in terms of getting that right. Aboriginal people, we've been bloody researched like any Aboriginal person, or every Indigenous people around the world. You've been researched to the nth degree, and all that material, all that intellectual property, all that ownership, it goes to somebody else.
If Aboriginal communities create their own materials and they decide to create their own website about it, then that's terrific. They're using their own material in a way that they want to do it, and they're able to represent themselves in a way that they wish to be represented.
You have all these technologies around, and putting them to use is what we need to be doing. And to put them to use, technology needs content, and what Indigenous people have is a lot of knowledge and content. So for Indigenous people to start using technologies in this day and era and time is really, really crucial. We go out and train communities to do film, edit, get out on country, work with elders, and also give them a database to fill knowledge out. And the old people are their own researchers. They're with people who they know and trust, and those people are the recorders who are holding the cameras. But the database and the recording is only just one component of the project. Once they start that very first stages of recording knowledge and applying to database on that technical sense, then it pans out further into whatever the endless amount of opportunities and outcomes that we work on in terms of documentary, education, music, land management projects, to health. It can feed into anything, any system within your community. And for Indigenous people, our language is visual. We don't write down with pens and paper. We like to express what we mean by actually doing it and demonstrating it. So we get out on country and we film the elders doing and actually doing the practice, not just talking in a room or recording it or writing it down like a modern researcher would do. We're out there using technology that's closest to the traditional transfer, where the old man is actually doing the knowledge or the practice. So if we're talking about a tree, he'll be out there by that tree, and he'll be actually, getting the fruit and eating the fruit in front of you, or pulling the root out of the ground and smashing it up and using it to make a medicine or to use it to whatever, to show how it's actually done.
I used to go and sit down with my grandparents, Jimmy Riley and Elizabeth Riley, and they used to tell us stories and some of their tribal ways. Our grandparents used to get that nut and put it in the cold and tell us bran and turn it over, and then they grate it on a rock, plant it on a rock. I think if you go in Noonbar, you'll see that rock there where they grind that into a powder. Then they would put that into the in the dilly bag, and then they put it in the stream, and that's how those poisons washed away.
It's the story that's been told around the campfire. And when our elders tell the story, I tell you, you wouldn't want to get up even when nature calls to go to the toilet. They're the best storytellers ever.
I'll tell you a bit about Wilma Walker. That was my auntie. That was my father cousin. She's lived down Mossman, and years ago when we were small, they had a track coming up Black Mountain. Just the only track to come up here to Mission, and to come here, they had to climb that Black Mountain. So that's how we got in contact with our parents, telling us what happened. So as we grew, then we came to find out that Grandma Wilma, our Auntie Wilma, was living in Mossman, and we asked her to teach us how to do dilly bag. So we had to go down with the bus every day for her to teach us what to do, how to do the dilly bag, because we wanted to keep the culture alive. And she only died this year at the age of 87, roughly. because her father was a white man, she started going mission, and she just told us that story that when the police went round to go on mission to look for her, her father and her mother told her to get in the basket and not to move, because she was one of the fair child and only one in the family, and she had to stay in this basket for 2 hours till the police left. And had she moved or they found out she was in the basket, the whole family would have been get punished for that. And it was only because she hid in the basket that she was saved. And, you know, she cried when she told us that story. And she said, oh, my daddy looked after me, meaning his full-blooded father. And she, you know, she's very thankful that she wasn't sent on a mission.
It's things that been handed down to us, like the weaving. I remember my mom's mom. She was a good weaver, and she was one of the best. You know, as far as I can recall as a child growing up here at Mona Mona. And one of my grandfather was the good tree climber, that they climb up with the lawyer cane. So he was good in doing things like that. So he used to climb the tree with just a lawyer cane, just around. And that's talent. That's a talent that no one else got. Our traditional knowledge and the weaving that we got, no one else does it. You know, no matter what Aboriginal from what land, they hold that knowledge.
We'll never be able to go back to how it was, but at least Aboriginal children can feel strong and strengthen the fact that they know their stories of where they come from, and be proud of that fact, but be able to adapt and maybe coexist in today's society with the strength of knowing who they are.
There's a huge gap between our youth and the elders. What this is about is using technology to re-engage our youth into the values of our traditional knowledge systems and reviving that and maintaining that structure in the contemporary sense, you know.
You can't understand our culture, you can't understand our language, you can't understand who we are if you don't walk the country you're from. How do I bring that to bear using digital media technologies for them? Some of them wanted to present it to the whole world, many didn't. Some wanted to just keep it as a way of sharing it with their kids and their grandkids and whatnot, to pass it on. So from an oral stories, from an oral tradition way, I thought technology like this, ICT, could be useful. I heard a lot about simulations. That's when I was first thinking maybe we can do this sort of stuff. It might be a good way to transfer game technology into proper, serious cultural heritage mapping technology. Game technology is a bit cartoonish. People wanted photorealism. They wanted to seem like you're walking country. Now, you can do that with film, but then again, film is still a snapshot in time. New media technology, this simulation type of technology, is like celestial in a sense. It's time-based. When you're in the world, you're actually in the world where you are. And if we're smart enough, we could have brought it into recreation of the country at the time you're there. And that was what you're trying to get to. Real virtuality, and augmenting that with cultural heritage values that would be relevant to that country by the traditional owners that come from that country. This is a work that is pretty significant. It's about rock art shown in Western Queensland. Each one of these works is a rollover, so there's 10 videos along the bottom, and just to understand the work, we got Vincent to talk about it and videotaped it. So,
like they've used the cane over and over on the paintings on the cane wall.
so they're just short snippets to interpret the art. What we've done then is we've geospatially put this painting back in the context of the space that he actually painted it from. So this here is a photogrammetry representation of the rock art that he was speaking about. And this here is the rock art, and you can, if you actually go to Canova Gorge, you'll see it. This fella here is a big tall man stenciled in. There's handprints here, there's boomerangs, there's fish nets, there's stories that go with this entire work. So we've got to back into this digital songlines world, which means that anybody can contribute to it. And it's supposed to be a tool that any layman can go off and do a study of their cultural heritage values. Maybe it's a tree of significance that they want to describe, and then if they know where that is in the world, they can then create that tree in this virtual space. It would be 600 different geographical maps of all the tribes of Aboriginal Australia, describing their land and their culture and their stories in their own context in a 3D interactive world.
Humans are very resilient. I mean, that's any cultures. So I'm confident that we will continue to find a way, and everything has to be used. Whether we're using digital technology, whether we're putting together programs where people go out, and I think it's got to be a combination of both. You've got to continue to maintain the human part of the recipe. You know, it's like trying to make a cake or a loaf of bread without any raising mixture. You know, it just won't work, it'll be flat.
There's all sorts of approaches that people are taking to developing these indigenous multimedia cultural systems. Some of them are very high-tech and very expensive, where you need lots of very highly skilled, highly trained ICT professionals. But there have also been lots of projects which have used pretty basic technology. These are really interesting because they speak to the cultural strengths of Indigenous people, which are firmly embedded in dance, in performance, in the pictorial as well, in the graphical elements like paintings, body paintings, tree paintings, sand paintings, all that kind of thing. So this seems a natural thing for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities.
Everyone that wants to come to Australia wants that personal interaction with an Indigenous person, but unfortunately to take them to the remote communities is just not possible. So at least coming to the Jabberguy Cultural Park, you're getting just a taste of what it is to who we are as Indigenous people. And if we can showcase our culture this way, by having mum and dad and 3 kids come in and say, "G'day, my name's David, I want to take you over here and show you how to throw a boomerang or throw out a spear," I'm giving you the opportunity to be able to just have a taste of what it's like for our mob.
Okay, imagine if you got bitten by the snake. We must take you back to the campsite. We got to quickly heat 2 rocks up in a fire. The second step, how am I going to keep that person calm? In Australia, we like to hit them with a rock. That is the best way to keep a person calm, is that you must hit them with a rock. What we do is that we place the 2-headed rock on each side of the foot. Place the cocky apple leaf over the snake bite. What it does is the heat of the rock and the leaf will jet the venom poison. And if you don't have time, you got a mobile phone on you, I suggest you better call emergency straight away.
That's what I'm saying. We're edutainers here at the end of the day, because we're entertaining, but we're educating people about who we are as Indigenous Australians. And Jabberguy Cultural Park, yes, we've had our knockers because we're just seen as some Disneyland park. But at the end of the day, that's what we've got to overcome, those barriers, and knock down those cages so we become interactive and just be who we are. We're not trying to be wannabes, we're just being who we are. So if we can invite you to come into our park and make you feel at home and feel that you've gone away knowing a little bit more about who we are as Indigenous Aussies, that's what matters.
We welcome people to our country. We perform traditional welcome ceremonies. It's a convention now that's grown in the last 20 years, 15 years here in Australia. And what we have to do is to add depth to it by understanding what that means. When an Indigenous person says, "I'm welcoming you to my country," they're talking about their country being a spiritual, religious landscape. They welcome and offer you a safe journey through their country. And that's a serious business. I mean, our culture is alive and well in our land. This land is vibrant.
This is where we grew up, and it wasn't the fact that we didn't have a house or a place to live in. We had a town that we lived in, and we had the technologies. And at my age, when I was a kid, we had video games and all those things, but we spend a majority of our time down by the waterside and swimming and all those things. And at the end of the day, the time that we spent down by the river ended up touching on every single thing in my life today, and really did prepare me for everything in life. It prepared me for sharing, and it prepared me for hunting and gathering, and it prepared me for having appreciation for country and the environment. All these things that our younger people are missing out on today. Not far up over the trees, there's a whole community of people, and there's no children down here playing in the water. Everyone's playing with video games and things like that. So for me, that's a sad thing, you know, because the country needs the people. And the country needs the people to understand the country.
All the land mean everything. Through our law and custom, we are the custodian of Australia. No matter which tribe you come from, we inherited the land, not through the Western law, but through our law and custom, we own the land, regardless. We didn't destroy the land, whereas the white man did. That's the reality of it, that they destroyed Australia, not me, or not any of our tribes destroyed it.
They gave us a piece of land so that we could pay rate on it. Most of us lost our land through that because we didn't know or understand why we had to pay for that piece of land, because to our knowledge it's our land. So we lost all of that. Even now today we got nothing.
There's a lot that respect our dreamings, our stories of the land, and there's others that are ignorant of it. To inherit such a beautiful land and country, I mean, the government don't see it that way, that we are the true owners. I mean, they stole it from us, and they don't want to admit it. And we should be the richest people in Australia. Should be.
Bye.